Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we explore how work is transforming one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today the conversation is going to be about jobs, or rather, why jobs cease to be the basic unit of work. Because as AI joins people in teams and starts tackling portions of the work, we're disrupting jobs. We're basically separating work into tasks. And once we do that, we don't only impact jobs, we impact who does the work, not just between humans and agents, but also between employees and other people out there who can do the work. Once we start talking about tasks, we can ask, who are the people who are best suited to do the work? Where are they? How do we contract with them? For me, this idea that we can finally start seeing the unbundling of work so that work and people come together in new forms of contract, that's a great win, not only for organizations, but also for people, all those people over the world who didn't fit into the old structures of work. Which is why I'm really happy to welcome my guest today, Carrol Chang, CEO of Andela, where she's reshaping how global technical talent is sourced, developed, and deployed at scale. Carrol, welcome to Future of Next Work.
Thank you for having me, Nirit. It's very, very much an honor to be here.
Thank you. And I want to talk about that basic disruption because I've seen you address this, right, from job to tasks. Tell me, what do you think is going on?
For the history of human labor, I would say behind the desk labor, we have seen that the atomic unit of work has been the human. Meaning, when you have a large mandate and you have a big job to get done, what you would typically do is figure out who you need to hire for those jobs. And you would go out and you would hire people. And we're seeing with AI that the potential of the way work is matched with people can be quite different. And the atomic unit can actually break down further from the job into the component tasks, which require subject matter expertise and executional excellence to find the right people in the world to do those specific tasks. So what I think is going on and what's going to happen more with AI is that you're going to see bigger jobs break down into tasks, and the atomic unit of work is no longer going to be the full-time employee or the human working 40 hours a week against that job. But in fact, you'll have humans who are most suited to those individual tasks get matched to them.
So let's talk about the challenges, right? So first of all, I agree with you. And I think it's the what's driving this right now is we actually have to break the jobs into tasks because we're offloading tasks to AI, right? And so then there's the remaining tasks, and we understand that those are not the standard full-time jobs anymore. And there's this whole conversation going on right now is how do you restructure the remaining portion, right? I think the assumption still is you're going to rebuild jobs around the remaining human tasks from whatever we, took apart and put back together again. And you're challenging that assumption. And again, I totally agree with you. But let me play devil's advocate for a second. The reason a lot of the platform economy or independent economy didn't evolve to the higher end at scale is because even tasks are teamwork, and they require in-depth knowledge of the organization, and frankly, organizations want to feel in control. So how are we going to address that?
There's a lot of soft skills required in doing a job successfully that are outside of the actual technical skills required to do the task. And you hit the nail on the head. It is teamwork. It's communication with both technical and non-technical audiences. It's leadership. It's proactivity, right? These are the kinds of professional behaviors that when you have a colleague who's really good at that stuff, it feels awesome to work with them. And the value of that is not only not going to go away, but it's actually going to become emphasized because, well, AI is taking over more and more of the base level, discrete units of work, these micro tasks. And so then the human is freed up to do higher order work. And the human actually should be interacting with more humans as they are directing and orchestrating this complex network of tasks. The way I liken it is that today, in any job, you have managers, people managers, and then you have individual contributors. AI is actually going to make everybody more like a manager, because the way you use AI is you describe a job and then you break it down into steps. You have to provide sufficient detail for the AI to do the job. Once AI does the job, then you review the work product and you give feedback so that the AI can improve it. Well, describing a task to be done, reviewing work product, giving feedback, reviewing the iterations, that is the very job of a people manager. And so what AI is doing is actually going to turn every single person more into a people manager.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on that. I think where I'm going with my question, though, is a lot of what you're describing can be done within organizations. So they could still basically say, I'm going to pull together the remaining portions of the human aspect of the jobs into new full-time roles for employees, maybe less overall, to manage or work in this environment within the organization. How do we take it from there to actually talk about broader access to talent that isn't necessarily inside organizations?
I think you're right. I think that the humans that are remaining within the organization to do those higher order tasks, like piecing together the work, working with team members, figuring out how to install AI deployments at scale within broad, complex enterprise systems, I think that that work will remain. It will be with the humans. And it's just a different set of skills. Like you people who have historically built a career executing the tasks are not necessarily going to be prepared to then orchestrate the systems. And so what we have to do is we have to set expectations properly with the workforce to say, your job is going to change. And it's going to feel like a lot more of these people skills, leadership, management. And you may decide that that is awesome and that you want to do that, in which case we're going to reskill you and train you and support you so that you can be successful and stay here. Or you might decide that that is not what you want to do. And maybe you want to enter more of this economy of, I want to see the tasks broken out. I want to receive those tasks. I want to be a doer of those tasks. But I think that there's a massive change management required. I do agree with you. I think there's going to be humans left and required to do a lot of the orchestration and piecing together of this work. But that job is fundamentally different from a lot of the task execution that a lot of the workforce does today.
So you just described a very big transformation to how we describe ourselves professionally. Because I'm thinking of all the technology people that you actually, work with, and a lot of them, they define themselves, but what they know how to do from a technology standpoint, right? I know how to code, or I know how to, work with hardware, or I know how to debug. And suddenly we're taking a lot of those elements away. How do we define ourselves professionally?
I think that there's a way where there's a world where it doesn't change much. I mean, think about construction workers, right? What are they doing? They're working together to build a house. And or let's say one day you have the nail gun or the drill invented. And so you have a lot of people on the construction site who are nervous because their job has been to nail nails and to screw screws all day. And then you have the drill coming along, right? And you don't need 10 people now to screw screws all day. You need maybe one to operate the drill, right? So what happens to those other 9 people? Well, more likely what's going to happen is that they're going to find other jobs on the construction site where their capacity is needed. But ultimately, how would that person describe their job? Well, in a detailed way, they might say, my job is to screw screws in, right? But really what their job is to work with a team to build a house. And so even though AI might change the nature of the actual tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis, if you abstract it, really what we're doing is the same. For Andela, we work with technologists. Their job is to build software. It is to deploy technology at scale for enterprise. And that's not going to change. What may change is the fact that the tasks that you do on a day-to-day basis are no longer handwriting code. Instead, what you're doing is you're overseeing agents that are automatically writing code for you, but you still have to review that code. You still have to decide how that code is going to work with other kinds of code, and is it going to be deployed safely and reliably in your company? That hasn't fundamentally changed.
And how has the allocation of people and work changed? Because that's another language we use, right? I mean, we give you a job title and then we know your roles and responsibilities, the reporting structure, everything follows. How do you manage that now?
I think that the will job titles change? Probably. I think that job titles changing are really just a symptom of the identity of the kind of core identity of the job changing. And people attach a lot of significance and pride and emotion to their jobs. It is where they spend most of their waking hours. And so, are we going to be asking uh, people to make significant changes in what they do in their jobs, right? Where they spend most of their waking hours? Yes, that's going to be a massive change. I think that the job of leaders and managers in this moment with AI is to set people's expectations about how their job's going to change, what they have to do to be successful in the new economy. Do they want to opt in or out? I think there are big unanswered questions around where will this all net out with the number of jobs for humans? Certainly some jobs are going to grow in demand. Certain jobs will shrink in demand, but where does that all net out? I don't know yet. I don't think the world actually knows yet. I am pretty optimistic that we're not going to end up in this world where there's going to be a huge slashing and decimation of jobs left for humans. I think the nature of those jobs will change a lot. So I think that will job titles change? Will org structures change? Yes, they will. That
Yeah,
shouldn't be scary.
I'm going to, so let me push back a little bit because I'm asking you, I think, the next question. We started saying we're unbundling jobs because you're right. We created them around that entity of the full-time human, right? And on our capacity. And that's how we ended up defining jobs and the number of jobs that we had and the org structure in terms of how many people can report to a certain manager, et cetera, right? If we're unbundling jobs into tasks and some of the tasks go away to technology and then we're redefining what people are doing, do we need to rebundle them back into jobs and describe them in a new way? Or can we basically say that we can rethink how the work units and the people doing them can come together in a format that isn't just a new way to call the job or a new way to call the structure? I think that's what I was asking myself as you're thinking about how people do the work. Do they need to still redesign the jobs and fit into an org structure?
I think that if you are a single FTE, a full-time employee, and you're employed by a company, let's say to be a software engineer, and let's say 10% of your job is spent doing highly specialized code development, and then 10% of your job is spent communicating with your team, and then et cetera, et cetera. But let's say that there is a portion of your work in which you uniquely and quite distinctively possess a skill that is really valuable to the company. What I envision in the future is that, let's say that 10 or 20% of your unique, highly specialized skills can be deployed on 5 or 10 different jobs at the same time. So basically, you can take your unique skills and expertise and you could really lean into it, because instead of using that only 10 or 20% of the time at your current job, you can actually use it across 5 or 10 different projects at a time. And what that means then is that you are growing your marketability of your skills, you're deeply specializing, and it is up to you to then say, I am piecing together, right, this project, this project, this project to create livelihood for myself, right, to enable me enough sustenance to provide for me and my family and to live a life in accordance of how I want to live it. In the history of work, it has really been about, you get a full-time job, you show up 9 to 5 usually, right? You work as you get some benefits, you get some paid time off, and you hopefully have enough time to spend with your family and your loved ones and your hobbies. In this future of work, I don't know that the work week is going to be 40 hours. People might rebundle their work to be 20 hours a week of work, Because if they're able to just work 2 jobs, 10 hours a week, and they're using highly specialized skills to do so, that might be enough for them and their families. And so really, we have to have platforms that are able to unbundle, to properly price, to assign, and to collect the work product. And people will make decisions for themselves on how much they want to work versus do all of the other things in their lives. That to me is one of the most promising aspects of AI, is that rather than forcing everybody into 40-hour-a-week jobs, we can disaggregate work, distribute it, match it to the right people. And then the future of work can actually be defined by how much do you need to do to live the life that you want, to self-actualize in the way that you want, to spend time with the people in the places and doing the things that matter to you. And for some people, that is not 40 hours a week. Some people,
Yeah,
it's much.
yeah. And I completely agree. And I love that vision. Just now turn it on its head and tell me, how do you see an organization managing the work they need to get done when it's getting done by portions of people?
They either have to build the platform themselves. So either an organization has to build the platform themselves that does that disaggregation, assignment, and then rebundling of work, or they have to work with a platform or a company that does that. That is where I see the future going. That is the kind of work and the kind of vision that we are working towards at Andela. And technology work specifically lends itself quite well to that. But I actually believe that this is going to hit many other fields in the future as well.
So is this like an evolution of the platform economy? It started with gig work, but we're kind of taking it up into higher level work.
I do think so. Yes. I mean, my background is from Uber. I spent almost 8 years there. And so I saw firsthand how marketplaces and tech-enabled marketplaces work. And I saw millions of people every month turn to Uber to find earning opportunities, to put food on the table for their families. And, Uber, for all of the criticism and valid criticism that is out there about the work model, what I heard time and time again from drivers and couriers that use Uber is that the number one reason they choose it is the flexibility, is because they want to choose when and where they work. They want to be able to decide which jobs to take. That was the core breakthrough of the gig economy, of this platformization of work. I think that you are seeing that now in many, many different kinds of work. And while, gig work in its original sense was usually lower barrier to entry work, like, driving passengers around or delivering food, now we are seeing platformization of work hit higher education levels, more skilled kinds of work. And there have been platforms that have existed for a while on this, but we're seeing them really explode. We're seeing them hit kind of a level of popularity and usage that I think is only going to go up with AI.
Yeah. So from the employee standpoint, and we have had, Upwork, Fiverr, and other platforms where independent economy has grown, right? From the employee, the individual level, you've described all the reasons why we love it and therefore we see it grow. I think the interesting question is it hasn't yet made itself into organizations as an alternative to that full-time equivalent headcount that we hire.
Yeah.
How do you see that changing?
The reason is that the platforms that have existed to date on the, let's call it Upwork or Fiverr or many, many other platforms that are out there, it still requires quite a significant amount of work and cognitive load for somebody to take a job, disaggregate it, and then post it and assign it to people, and then to take that work and rebundle it all together. Now with AI, so much of that work can actually be done by AI, which reduces the barrier to entry to have an organization post bigger and bigger jobs on platforms like the ones you mentioned. I think that organizations either internally are going to build these kinds of platforms to unbundle jobs into tasks, assign them, and then rebundle them, or they're going to use partner platforms like Andela to do so.
Yeah. I think that portion is clearly. I mean, like I said, totally agree with you. Because the unbundling needs to happen. It needs to happen to bring AI into the mix. I think what's still interesting to see how it evolves is what you called the soft skills, and I think there's a there's a whole layer of that unique human contribution into work that we'll end up having. We need to understand it better than we did in the past, because a lot of it we kind of just did while we were writing code, right? And now that's going to be the job. And so it's going to be really interesting whether you can disconnect that from the organization, the culture, the overall context that you have as an employee versus somebody coming in from the outside to do portions of work.
On the organizational culture and context, this is such a critical piece of how you work successfully in an organization. And typically what we do when we hire a new person is we expect them to take a couple months to get used to things, right? To onboard. And so what happens in that first 2 to 3 months of an employee joining a new company is you expect them to observe the culture. You expect them to understand these unspoken or the explicit norms, and then to start writing their communications in the style of the way the company does, right? If you have PRDs, product requirement documents, right? Each engineering and product team has their own way that they expect those to be written. Each company has their own way of writing emails. They have their own voice, right? Their messaging platforms. And so we expect employees to pick all that up in the first 2 to 3 months, really to get used to the culture. And the funny thing is that AI can actually help you speed those cycles in these very kind of human elements of getting to work at a company, which is all the norms and the culture of the company. AI can help because AI can absorb a lot of that and then bundle. AI can actually distill all of that into an onboarding agent for a new team member. And a lot of companies don't write this stuff down. They just expect by osmosis for new employees to pick it up. But actually what AI can do is it can actually glean and distill all of those things about the culture into an agent that will help employees onboard. We are actually working on this at Andela because we have talent who go on and off different clients because they're contractors, right? They're freelancers. And so they won't stay at the same client for 5 or 10 years. Maybe it's 12 months, maybe it's 6 months. And when you do that, the clients oftentimes feel pain because they're like, oh, people are rolling on and off and they take so much time to re-onboard somebody. And so what we are working on is an onboarding agent where if we are bringing a new team member onto a client, it should feel seamless. And why? Because you had AI help you understand the unspoken norms and the spoken norms, right? To really help you acclimate to the culture. AI can actually help in all of this, right? In the things that feel very human in your process of working and getting used to an organization. AI can actually help with all of that.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful example of why I keep saying that there's a lot of nuances, of human nuances that we've never needed to fully pay attention to. I mean, we use the word culture, but what are the elements that form a culture and how can you ramp someone? It goes back to even the whole discussion on remote versus offices, right? I mean, because we used to absorb a lot of that from the posters on the walls and the people in the corridors and, even the layout of the building. So it's really interesting that how we will end up, I think, somehow redefining what makes a culture. If the only difference is, the ending of your email. If you work for company X or company Y, that becomes insufficient.
This may be a silly example, but different organizations have different cultures around email. And so reply all is an example of this, where in certain companies, like you have a discussion over email and there's like 25 reply alls for people throughout the group. And that is the way that they want the discussion to happen. And then in other companies, that's anathema. I mean, it's like once there's been 2 or 3 reply alls, if you've got something to say, just go and ping that person, grab them, talk about it, resolve it. And you just don't want to start this big, long chain of reply alls. And it seems perhaps minute, right? And maybe silly, but things like that have to be learned by new members of a team because you want to work in the way that the organization is used to working and the way that it's going to be successful for them. And again, things like this don't have to just be left to chance for people to pick up. You can actually have AI help with all of this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Okay, this is fascinating. So as you think through this, and, I used to say sometime in the future, we used to put a number, and I don't know if the future is 6 months or, 2 years, but not going any further than that. how do you envision the world when it's evolved to where you want to see it?
I think that we are going to see less than 40 hours a week of work. I would love to see us move towards a world in which the majority of our time is left to us to spend how we want. The 40-hour a week work week, the 5-day a week, 8 hours a day, came from the Industrial Revolution 100 years ago. With the proliferation of factories and machines, there was a lot of really hard labor being done. And the labor movement started in the United States around this time, and people advocated for limits to work. And so the standard that we have today is from that time, and that's 100 years ago. Now we're at the precipice of the biggest technological breakthrough of our lifetimes. And I would be really shocked if the standards and expectations from the Industrial Revolution carried us through into the future. I think one of the greatest promises of AI, of this biggest technological breakthrough of our time, is that it should allow us fundamentally to have more human connection.
Yeah. And I called this podcast The Future of Less Work. And I did not mean it in the dystopian version. I actually meant less of what doesn't matter and more of what does.
That's exactly right.
Fabulous. So one last question I always wrap with. What do you think is the question we should all be asking ourselves about the future of work?
Are you ready to make a change? Do you know how a change curve works? You start out with some shock and denial, then you fall into a pit of despair. And you've got to get to a place where you have accepted the change so that you can ultimately thrive. But a change curve looks like this. It looks like a J. And AI is going to change a lot of what we do and see on an everyday basis. It's going to change the way that we shop for our groceries, the way that we punch text into a computer to do our jobs. For if we don't sit behind a desk and we go to a factory floor to do our jobs, it's going to change that as well. AI is going to touch every aspect of our lives, I think, within the next 20 or 30 years. And are we ready for that change? I think that the number one responsibility that we have as humans, as just humans who exist in the world, but also as leaders and as managers and organizations, is, do you know what these changes are going to bring for yourself and for your workforce? And are you ready to manage that change? How do you get the metabolism of change in a company up?
Yep. Fabulous. Thank you, Carrol, for joining me today. For more about Carrol Chang and her work at Andela, you'll find the links in the episode description. If you've enjoyed today's episode, follow The Future of Less Work wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, your best people do not work because they have to. They do not work because you tell them to or because you measure them on it. They work because they want to. Because by working for you, they're doing what's important to them in life. Till next time.